We talk about diabetes, type 1, type 2, and we kind of stop the conversation there. But what we should really understand is that there's like a conveyor belt. Most of us are on this conveyor belt that's moving us towards not just diabetes, but a host of other issues. And it all starts with insulin resistance.
Welcome to the good life.
Yeah. Welcome to another episode of the Good Life Show. My name is Kobi, and my partner Chris decided to skip out on me today. I'm just kidding. Chris is doing some traveling and won't be able to hop on, so I'm taking the reins, and they done messed up giving me the reins today because we're about to go bonkers. Really diving into deep on the health side. Today, I'm going to take the opportunity to share into a little bit more detail a presentation I did on metabolic health, which I think is probably one of the number one things we need to talk about right now in the area of health. And I'm going to do a deep dive for you guys on that topic. Hopefully, you'll be able to see some of the slides as well, because we're going to definitely go deep and offer some solutions as well. So I'm super excited for this. Appreciate the team for giving me an opportunity to do this. I mean, this is going to be a lot of fun. So gear up, get ready. We're about to get nerdy today. Today's 2x2. We're going to hop in real quick here, and it will be a little more be by 2x1 because there's only one real opinion, right? But today's 2x2, we're talk about a story that came out. I believe it was on Common Dreams and maybe CNN and a few others. But it says when big pharma spends more on stock buybacks than research and development. Now, one line here that was really interesting for me was that the 14 largest publicly traded pharmaceutical companies spent 747 billion with a B on stock buybacks and dividends from 2012 to 2021. Way more than the 660 billion they spent on research and development. So where money flows, attention goes, right? So basically, this is what they looking at the gap between the two tells us where the emphasis is and what is being spent on. And we're going to spend all of today talking about this. So we're not going to go too deep, but I mean, the biggest pharma companies invest in prevention. Like their investment in prevention, I've spoken on this before, is laughable, if pretty much non-existent. So that's the 2x2 for today. We all know this. It is a corrupt game, and I hope I don't get canceled for this, but it is a corrupt game between our people that grow the food, big agriculture, growing the food, putting microplastics in our water, having pesticides on fruits and vegetables, and hormones in our meats. So, I mean, it is what it is. You know, I'm not saying they're all out to get us, but certainly the way it's set up for the flow of money and not necessarily for our overall health as a being. So that's big agriculture. Then big agriculture then goes to these big supermarket chains, big conglomerates, big food, right? Big food buying all of land, farm, goods, dictating how it should be produced. And then we get the results that we get, right? With the food and the conditions that we get. And today we'll dive a lot deeper into that as well. Maintain the people in a state where they're not dying, right? Because you want them alive, but in a place where they're consistently and perpetually sick, so they need something else and they need the system. I remember an article that I've shared on the show before, which is that I believe it was Goldman Sachs. Goldman Sachs was asking, is curing people a sustainable business model? Is curing people a sustainable business model? And the answer to that was an emphatic no. All right, so it's unfortunate, but that's why we do this show. So we dive into the nitty gritties of what matters. And just briefly, let's touch on insulin resistance. Now, this is Very important to understand. And let me try to break it down into just very layman terms here. So, and I say break it down as if I'm, some the world leading expert on this, but just try to put it in a sense that makes sense. First and foremost, when our blood sugar is high, our pancreas releases insulin, and that insulin signals to our liver, fat, and muscle cells to open up and take some of that blood sugar or take some of that sugar from our blood. And also signals to our body that we're full. We've got enough energy. We don't need more. Okay. That's when things are normal. When things are not normal, when insulin resistance comes into play, those cells start to ignore, imagine a teenager, right, starts to ignore the signals of the insulin. And so more and more insulin, it's like when your mom is shouting upstairs, hey, come down. And she doesn't hear from you, so she keeps shouting louder and louder, right? If you remember those days. But more and more insulin is needed to be pumped out by the pancreas for the blood sugar to be maintained within a span that will essentially not kill us. Okay. Now, there are two issues here. There's the issue of the blood sugar being high, too high, and then there's the issue of there being too much insulin in the system. Both are problematic. Right. And that's what we're going to talk about a little bit today is how do we get to the point where we're looking at this thing and what are we can what are the things that we can possibly do about this? All right. So let's do that. Let us dive back. 88 million adults in the US, more than 1 in 3 were living with pre-diabetes in 2018. And the scary part is 84% didn't know. 84% didn't know. All right. So this is pretty critical here. And this is another piece that I've been explaining recently on my channel that I think is incredibly important for people to understand. Rates of diabetes is going up for pretty much everybody. Now, we talk about diabetes, type 1, type 2, and we kind of stop the conversation there. But what we should really understand is that there's like a conveyor belt for the normal corporate athlete. I mean, the person that gets out of college, gets the office job, works 9 to 5, and is just kind of like, normal person going through life, like myself. Okay. Most of us are on this conveyor belt that's moving us towards not just diabetes, but a host of other issues. And it all starts with insulin resistance, progresses on to then being so insulin resistance again, being that your cells are not listening to the insulin essentially. Prediabetes means that your blood sugar is still fine, but the level of insulin required to maintain that is going higher and higher and higher and higher, causing a bunch of issues. Now, when you finally hit that magic number, whatever that is, I actually don't know it off the top of my head. When you hit that magic number of like, whoa, you now have diabetes, now they start to put you in a totally different category and give you a whole bunch of medicine to actually go ahead and control that when it's like a switch all of a sudden hit, but you've been having a lot of these issues for an extended period of time. Now, the reason to understand this, again, is to say that it's affecting so many people, right? 84% of that 88 million did not know. So what is going on? All right. What is going on? One of the things going on is that doctors aren't necessarily looking for insulin resistance. There's very few doctors or research that I've read of individuals or doctors who are looking for this in their patients or treating this right in their patients. Now, I'm going to pull up this image briefly here to share because I think it's really important that we understand this before we move on. We talk about what it is, but we also have to look at why it's important to know. Let's look at the whole host of issues that are caused by this root cause. Now, I found this image that I think does a really great job. I'm going to try to bring it up here, and then we're going to talk about it. So here we have this image that shows all of the different, some of the different like root causes: chronic stress, processed food, sugar, lack of sleep, processed carbohydrates, cereals, et cetera, et cetera. And this being insulin resistance and the fruits, right? The many fruits that it bears: heart disease, erectile dysfunction, or other infertility issues, PCOS in women, type 2 diabetes, which we've already talked about, high blood pressure, stroke, Alzheimer's, etc. So we have this root cause, right? We have this root cause, insulin resistance, caused by a whole bunch of other issues, a whole bunch of lifestyle related and food related issues that then feeds all of this here. So when we look at this, we have to understand this, because this is what it has us on the conveyor belt. This is what has us on the conveyor belt. And when we understand that why we're on that conveyor belt, we can then step off. And now this might not be necessarily where you are, like you haven't really seen any signs of this, etc., or noticed anything in particular, but you might know somebody that does. So it's important for you to understand this as well. Now, going back to this, right? We talked about all the issues that will come, and here's a little chart. And this chart, or this graph, has to actually be a little bit different. The arrows here for the genetics, seed oil, etc., should be going into insulin resistance, as in it causes it, and then coming out are all the different issues that we talked about. But we'll get an updated one for you guys here. So here are some of the signs you want to look for. Here are some of the signs you want to look for. Waist to height ratio. That's like one of the biggest ones. Waist to height ratios. We want to look at, if you take a string and you measure your full height, right? The string. Well, that string goes around your waist twice. That's like about neutral. That's like where, you're okay. You're doing well. You're doing well. Now, if your waist starts to expand and that's not true anymore, the worse your situation gets. That's what waist to height ratio means. And you can look up specifically the parameters on that. But that string trick is one of the ones that I've read about, and one that looks it's pretty commonly used. High triglycerides is one thing. All right. Skin tags. I think we had a picture of it here. Here we go, right here. Skin tags. Here's waist to weight ratio. Dark patches as well on the neck. All right, that's another common sign. Swollen ankles, dark patches, talk about that. Abdominal fat. And this includes, I want to pause here for a second. And this includes individuals who are, quote unquote, TOFI, thin on the outside, fat on the inside. This is a real term. You can look this up. So individuals where you look at them, you're like, man, they're still skinny, but they have a whole bunch of issues like maybe acne, extreme thirst, or sugar cravings after eating, or high blood pressure, etc. Do not be fooled. There are things the eyes cannot see. Right? The things the eyes cannot see. So do not be fooled by that. Frequent urination is one. Now, obviously, if you've been drinking just a ton of water, and that's a little different than having frequent urination. In this sense of you're getting up to do it, you haven't even had that much water, but yet you feel the edge to go to the bathroom. This is causing huge problems globally, not just in the United States. Now, I know I have a tendency to do this, as do others, but we tend to focus on the issues in the United States, but this is actually quite global. This is actually quite global. Then we narrow in a little bit and we say the leading cause of death in high income countries. So when we look globally, 9 are preventable in their lifestyle base. Heart disease, Alzheimer's, stroke, et cetera, et cetera. And the US is number 1 in diabetes and number 2 in Alzheimer's. Okay. Which is being called type 3 diabetes, by the way. Now, this is the conveyor belt that I'm talking about. We have maybe like in the teens and 20s, an individual here who's fairly healthy. Everything is normal. They start, have high levels of stress. They're eating tons of refined carbs. They're eating a lot of sugar. They're not sleeping as well. Things are not going. Things are a little just low grade anxiety, etc. And we start to head into insulin resistant category, meaning now the cells are not responding as well to insulin. All right. And then we get into the pre-diabetic. Now, this is really interesting because at this stage of pre-diabetic, an individual can be here for 10, 20, 30 years before anything else is, or type 2 diabetes is reached. So you can be here for a while having a lot of like the low grade issues, the low grade um, inflammation issues, and all types of other things that present themselves without being a diabetic or without being even like quote unquote big or obese. Then what I found was really interesting is that we're progressing towards type 3 diabetes, right? Or Alzheimer's, which they're now calling type 3 diabetes. I thought that was really interesting. So this conveyor belt kind of, and you might take different avenues off of this, or you might branch a little bit different, but it's a conveyor belt that a lot of people are heading on. The numbers are increasing dramatically. But I believe by the year 2031, and I'm saying this off the top of my head, so double check me. 568 million diabetics, I believe, globally. Now that might not shock you, but what should be or what we should take note of is that that's at a rate that's much higher, or increasing at a rate much higher than was predicted. So we're not, it's not looking too good here. So 88 million, then no, back here again. Now, okay, here we go. 568 million by the year 2030. So it did hit that. All right. And look at the progression here. In 1976, 5% of people in the United States over the age of 65. So the young weren't getting sick or suffering issues from it. It was mostly older people, and it was a small percentage of them. Now, in the year 2000, an estimated 151 million diabetics globally. That is global. And then by 2014, 463 million. So we're not moving in a great direction. And with all of the different tools, different research and things that have been discovered, you would think that we would be moving in the right direction. But that tells us that the entire in and of itself is sick. And typically what do people do? They diet and they have temporary success. They'll fail. They'll do something else, like try a different diet, and they just keep yo-yoing back and forth. And guys, modern willpower is not a strategy. Willpower is not a strategy to overcome modern food environment, work stress, family stress, decision fatigue, time gap, etc. It's just not a good strategy. On top of that, too, I want to point out this thing here that I think is really interesting. Is look at this. Even if you do have the willpower to look at how our food has changed over the years. Our carrots used to look like this, potatoes used to look like that, and our rice has been stripped of all of its fiber. Apples used to look like this, not that. So our food is getting bigger and less nutritious. So we're eating more, bigger, less nutritious, and more addictive. Bigger, less nutritious, more addictive. So we're eating more and more to get less nutrition and produce more waste, both internally on the cellular level and also externally in terms of the impact on the environment. So the direction is not one that is very promising, but there's a lot of money at stake. There's a lot of money at stake, and we can't ignore that. Here we are. Even if you're like, hey, listen, I eat pretty good. Watermelons used to look like that. Now they look like this. Peaches like that. Now this. Bananas used to have a lot bigger seeds. And you've noticed, if you've ever been on a farm, you've noticed the size of chickens and just chickens over time. All right. It's an interesting documentary here that just shows the chicken industry and what's going on. I might check it out. Microplastics and water, like I talked about, and then tons of things that we use around the house. So who is to blame? Now, I might title this a little differently. It is a bit forward. We are pointing fingers a little bit. But quite frankly, I mean, if you look around, the main thing that has changed in terms of looking at, a generation, maybe two ago, where individuals in this in the 1970s, 1960s looked much different. We can definitely say that. I've seen a couple of people definitely look much different. The biggest difference between that time and now, right? And even before calorie counting was a big thing, is the food environment. And that's what we're looking at here. When we look at how much of our food that we consume is controlled by these Nestle, Coca-Cola, PepsiCo, General Mills, Mars, right? Kellogg, who all spend tons, billions, what's over billions, trillions of dollars on trying to influence our decisions, get us hooked on their product, right? As particularly our kids, get us hooked on their products, and then continue to pump them out. These are legal. Like, I don't think it's a stretch to say this is legal drugs, because this stuff is full of sugar that's just as addictive, gives you that high, and it's a lot easier to get than some of these other drugs we might compare them to. Then on top of that, look at the food chains that are around us, that are everywhere in every corner. If you can't get to a farm, you can definitely get to one of these fast food places to grab yourself a little burger, to grab yourself a pizza or whatever, right? Who in America, go anywhere in America, you see a Papa John's, you see an Arby's, you see a McDonald's, you get, right? I mean, to say that this is the environment is setting us up to fail, to say the least. Now look at this here. You say, okay, fine, that's cool, but I'm going to go to grocery stores to buy here. Well, the same mega groups are controlling that as well. Look at the food chain, the grocery systems that we have. They're pretty much all the same, pushing the same foods, right? The Walmart family just bought the Broncos, so they're doing pretty well. The American food chain. Look, I mean, if you can't see this stuff, you gotta rewatch it on my YouTube channel, and I think you will, hopefully will open your eyes a little bit if it hasn't already, or you can share it with somebody that will benefit from seeing it. So, what is the solution then? And I want to really kind of simplify this a little bit. So a lot of people try some of the things that you see on the screen and they don't fail. They try to calorie count, they try to track their macros. The thing with calorie counting and tracking macros is that it doesn't particularly care too much about the quality of the food. And I think, and this is the answer number one, I think that quality of food is probably the number one thing that we have to take a look at when addressing a lot of these issues. Um, People also try, meal replacements, box meals, and again, these things don't account for the quality of the food. So I think that's number one. We got to look at the quality of the food. All right, we got to look at the quality of the food, and then we have to look at what is it doing. What is it doing to our hormones? Because I believe if you, or this is my current hypothesis, I always reserve the right to change my mind as I get more information, as you do as well, is quality food with fasting. And what I mean by that is things like there's 9 different levels, maybe more of fasting that we can look at, from are you eating solid foods to which type of solid foods are you focused, are you carbs, animal, like where are you focused? Are you um doing just liquids, right? Whether it be smoothies or greens or fruit, etc. Cooked, is it not cooked? There's so many different levels of fasting, specifically with food here, that we can talk about. Is it a time thing? Are you doing intermittent fasting, where combining time restricted eating um, with quality of food, a high quality of food that's going to provide you with the nutrients that you need, and that's also going to provide you with the satiety, right? Have you be satisfied that you need, so that your body can function correctly. And if we do those two things, I believe that calorie count, tracking macros, all those things are not necessary, as is evident by years and years and years of us not counting calories, but being totally fine. All right. It is in the space now where we do need it, because we have so many things to choose from that don't necessarily fit the category of real food. So go ahead and rewatch this a number of times on YouTube, and let me know if you have any questions. I think this is an incredibly important topic to dive into. And if you find yourself with any of those signs, or you know somebody that finds themselves with some of those signs and you need help, make sure that you set up some time with me to chat. Every situation is different. There are different tools for different people. make sure you set up an opportunity to chat with me so that we can talk about your specific situation and chime in and create a plan that will be beneficial, or um, that will work best for you and where you are at currently. So that's what I'll say. But let me tell you about what has worked for me and a few clients that I worked with. I think it's important to share, kind of what I've seen. Um, for me, I started out, and this is my personal story here. If you want to make a note, I started out, when I got into just nutrition and fitness, etc. Normally, got my certification. Did a ton of classes. Actually, studied some nutrition stuff at Tufts University, my alma mater, as well. And I started coaching and training, and so I followed the normal protocol. Now, my movement piece changed tremendously because I got to a point where my body wasn't moving like I wanted it to, and the normal adages and the normal approach wasn't working. So I had to start figuring out different things there. And then I also noticed, internally too, I wasn't as great. Like my gut was a little off, even though I looked pretty good. Um, and I wanted to, and then also this was during the season of like kind of a lot of fear around our health publicly. So I wanted to figure out some other things to do besides count calories and just eat, quote unquote, just like traditionally healthy foods. And that's when I got into fasting. Now, fasting, honestly, like for me, really changed the game because it filled in a lot of gaps, which was this emphasis on quality of food and also timing of the food to be the most important thing. Now, I went through several different levels of fasting, from juice feasting to water fasting to fruit feasting, or fruit fasting as well, to dry fasting, to liquid fast, to multiple different types of fast, etc. And I would for sure say that it made a massive difference in my increase in the level of feel good chemicals in my body, like anxiety, depression, those type of things. Those type of mind things were significantly improved by me going on or practicing fasting. Um, and then also, so that's where I started. And I started with intermittent fasting. I believe it's probably the best place for most people to start. And starting by just slowly increasing progressive overload, how much you are doing, and then really focusing on the quality of the foods that you're having, where they're coming from, what did they do for their body? Are they from a source that you trust? Are they fulfilling a function, even if that function is enjoyment? And what does that look like? I believe this model is, not necessarily for everybody, but I believe it will help a lot of people. I've talked to a lot of corporate athletes and people who work in an office setting or who don't have a lot of time, et cetera, and who maybe don't necessarily or want the keys, right, to steer their body in the direction that they want to steer their body in. I think this will work great for them. And if that's you and you want to chat about how to implement that in your life specifically, or in your um, in your routine, and want to talk about how best to do that, or if you've already started intermittent fasting and you're having some issues with it, maybe you're super hungry all the time, or maybe you're scared to start at all and you don't know how. I've produced a lot of content around this. I'm more than happy to help. So, guys, I have literally been rambling for 30 minutes here to get you this information. I think this one is an episode that you certainly want to rewatch and ask me the questions, and make sure that you implement this, because this can be a game changer for your metabolic health, your gut health, how you feel inside, how you feel outside. Um, this can be massive for your longevity, vitality. It can be great for your energy level and for your performance, whether it's at work, at home, or in other areas where you may need high performance. That's up to you. All right. But I think this would be fantastic for some people to take on. Again, not everybody is this good for, but it's been great for me. I've been able to maintain my steady body fat, and be able to implement it and been fairly flexible with myself as well, which I think is key. If it is not sustainable, you're not going to keep it. That's just what it is. And that's it. I started calorie counting. I don't calorie count anymore. And I know a lot of people that have fallen off of that as well. Guys, that's it for me today. So the main thing to take away from today is understanding the conveyor belt that corporate athletes are on, from normal to type 2 diabetes and fertility issues and belly fat issues and all types of issues, skin issues, looking good, feeling good. You can definitely do something about it. And again, if you're ready to really roll, let me know. More than happy to help. Appreciate you guys tuning in. Make sure you watch this a couple of times. Subscribe. I know a lot of you guys see this. Please subscribe, like it, comment, do something to show us that you're watching this. And on next week, Chris and I will be back with another episode where we focus on the health and the wealth side. But until next time, peace.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of The Good Life. We hope you found our discussion helpful and inspiring.
If you enjoy this episode, please take a moment to subscribe and like our channel. And don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss an episode.
We want to hear from you, our listeners. If you have any feedback or suggestions for future episodes, please leave us a comment down below.
If you're listening to the podcast audio version, we appreciate you just as much. Thank you for tuning into the Good Life Show. And be sure to subscribe to our show on your favorite podcast platform so you don't miss an episode.
We believe that everyone has the potential to live their best life, and we hope our show helps you get that one step closer to achieving your goal.
If you know someone who would benefit from our show, please share it with them, and thank you for your continued support.
So again, that's it for another week's episode here on The Good Life. We'll see you next week for another inspiring conversation.
Welcome to the good life.